Matthew chapter 5, Introduction to the Sermon on the Mount. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. And he said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Salt and light. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. The fulfillment of the law. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter or the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Murder. You have heard it said to people long ago, "You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment." But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to their brother or sister, "Racha," which means foolish, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fires of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and then remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, and your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. Adultery. You have heard it said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Divorce. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Oaths. Again, you have heard it said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill it to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair turn white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this point comes from the evil one. An eye for an eye. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Love your enemies. You have heard it said that love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. All right, in the notations, it says, can anyone live up to these high standards? Even though the Sermon on the Mount has been called the Constitution for citizens of God's kingdom, we won't see flawed human beings reaching this level of perfection in this life. Jesus began the Beatitudes with our inability in mind. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Those acknowledging their spiritual poverty are in the best position to experience God's blessing and enjoy his kingdom. Our salvation and hope for heaven are rooted firmly in the grace of God. Nevertheless, God's grace will produce positive, tangible changes in our lives, even when our attempts result in failure. We are to keep trying and trusting. The Beatitudes are an ethical model that requires a declaration of dependence on God. Beatitudes describe the life of blessing God intended for humanity from the beginning. The closer we come to Jesus' standards, the more we experience the blessings. Why rejoice and be glad about persecution? Because it reinforces our identity with Jesus and the prophets. We can also be glad because righteousness, though it has its price, has a reward. Persecution reminds us that we can anticipate something better in heaven. Our joy comes not from the physical suffering itself, but from the reason for the suffering, Jesus the Messiah. How was the law fulfilled? With his sin-free life and sacrificial death, Jesus perfectly kept the letter and the spirit of the law. Other than Jesus, no one can perfectly obey God's law. But when God looks at believers in Jesus, he sees Jesus' righteousness instead of their sins. Jesus, with his perfect life, paid our penalty for breaking God's law. Jesus' righteousness is credited to the believers as their own. Why are some greater than others in the kingdom of heaven? The term least and great are used to show the things that are valued in God's spiritual kingdom. In the kingdom of heaven, obedience and faithfulness to God's ways are valued. Those who live according to God's ways will be rewarded. There will be no elitism in heaven, though some may receive richer blessings. How can we be more righteous than the Pharisees? By openly and honestly checking the spiritual conditions of our hearts. The Pharisees, who were proud of their zealous efforts to follow every detail of Jewish law, could never have admitted that they were poor in spirit. Their outward religious legalism covered up their inner spiritual poverty. Excuse me. When we confess our need and turn to Jesus for salvation, God makes us righteous, which our own efforts cannot accomplish. What is so bad about name calling? Sticks and stones, and yes, words can harm others. Jesus traces sins to its inner source, the condition of the human heart. Murder begins with a murderous attitude, that is, wishing harm to another person. Jesus considers the intent as dangerous as the act. What does raka mean? In Aramaic, the word raka, derived from the Hebrew rak, means to be empty, to refers to a vain, empty-headed, worthless person. While name-calling or libel could land some people in court, it was far more serious to be labeled someone a fool, since the term pronounced judgment on the person's inherent value. Viewing another person as utterly worthless is an attitude that leads to many other sins, including abuse, discrimination, and even murder. Settle matters quickly with our adversary. Will self-inflicted injury help us sin less? Jesus spent his life healing the crippled, so he certainly did not intend for people to mutilate themselves in the pursuit of holiness. Jesus was using hyperbole to get his listeners' attention. Sin is deadly serious, and the radical measures are required to eradicate it. Persistence or reoccurring sins jeopardize the spiritual life, much like gangrene that threatens physical health. Does infidelity mandate divorce? Jesus permits divorce in the case of infidelity, but he does not require it. To the contrary, when God's grace and forgiveness brings healing into a relationship, a marriage can be restored rather than terminated. Such a miracle is unthinkable from a human perspective, but God can bring restoration and hope even to relationships torn by pain, rejection, and unfaithfulness. Aren't there times when people should resist an evil person? We can either understand Jesus' words by seeing them in context. We can better, understand Jesus' words by seeing them in context. The words "you have heard that it is said, but I tell you" appear repeatedly throughout Matthew 5, contrasting the Pharisaical interpretation of the law with Jesus' fulfillment of the law's true intent. The law allowed for retaliation, but Jesus calls for reconciliation. To be struck on the cheek was symbolic of being personally insulted, not physically attacked. To turn the other cheek meant to ignore the insult. Jesus came to defeat the work of Satan. He gave his followers authority to overcome all the power of the enemy and the forces of evil in society. James and Peter tells us to resist the devil, yet Jesus also wants to conquer our desire to retaliate and avenge. God's people must work for justice, but not take personal revenge. Jesus stood silent before his accusers, allowing himself to be crucified, thereby winning the ultimate battle over the enemy. Similarly, we can win battles of the heart by turning the other cheek.